girls, happy May. So today we are talking about the next behind the scenes concept that we have. Last month we talked about emails, and this month we're talking about databases. Databases power a lot of the things that you could find on the internet. Basically anything, anytime you go to a website and it's changing, anytime you have to log into a website, anything there might be information being stored somewhere, it's almost certainly being stored in a database. So a database, generally speaking, it's just an organized collection of all that stored information. Obviously, you wouldn't just write all that information down in a big list and then attempt to find it. That would be impossible. So we organize it, we group it, and we make it easier to search for and to record. We group and organize it in what are called tables. Databases and tables allow everything that's stored within it, which we call data, to be retrieved, searched, checked, added, modified, deleted, and whether you want to get a single record or all of it, you can easily do that so long as it's organized properly. So you can think about a database table like an Excel spreadsheet. So this table right here is probably going to look pretty familiar if you've ever used Excel or anything like that. Google spreadsheets, Google Sheets. In this case, this table represents the planets in our solar system. Sorry, Pluto. We have columns, which are pieces of data that we would gather for each of the records. The records are the rows, so you can read each one side by side. In this case, the name is the property we're all going to know much more thoroughly than any of these numbers. So each one of these, Mercury, has an ID, a diameter in kilometers, and an average distance to the sun. And so the ID is very important because it has to be unique. It gives us the ability to associate. We might, I mean, not in planet terms, because obviously we know that the planets all have their own names, but imagine if we were making a database table that recorded all of us and all of our ages or all of our schools or all of our favorite colors or something like that. We would want to have unique IDs because what if two of us have the same name? Wouldn't necessarily, we could use last names, but what if two of us have the same first name and last name? Then it gets very complicated. So we make sure we always have an ID field that'll always be unique no matter what. Like I said, each one is made up of 4 columns. In this case, we have 4 columns. We have our ID, we have the name of the planet, the diameter, and the average distance to the sun. Now from here, we could do something like look for all of the planets. Maybe we want to compare them by which one is the largest, or which one is the smallest, or which one is furthest or closest to the sun. In that case, we could search in this database table for any of those things that we were looking for specifically. Roughly speaking, that is what a database is. This could store information on users to a certain site. It could store information about songs. If this was like a database table that kept a library of songs, made a playlist, something like that. Basically, anytime you're looking to keep data in here, your teachers would have something like this for students in the class with grades and scores, things like that, attendance as well. Each row represents a record of data. So you're always going to get row with the ID 8 is always going to be Neptune, and these values would be associated with it as well. So that's the easiest way to think of it. It's just a 2-dimensional columns, rows, and the whole thing together is a table. Okay, so now with that basic understanding of what they are, how are we going to practice this? You'll remember last month that when we did the emails, we created a nice JavaScript file that you could reference either by using a template in CodePen for a new pen or for adding some files to an existing one. And that gave you some already written JavaScript functions available that made sending the email a lot easier. We're going to do the same thing here because, again, this is a little bit tricky. So we've set up 2 databases that live somewhere else. I'll show them to you in a moment. And then we've written functions that go and retrieve a random record from either of those tables, depending on which route you want your project to take. So you can do this 2 different ways, just like last month. You can start a whole new CodePen if you're looking to have this be the only thing that's on there, or you can use an existing one. In this case, because it's only one JavaScript file that we need to include, we didn't even attempt to do a template because we do want to try to have you include these, not by just setting up a brand new pen every time. This one especially is pretty easy to integrate into an existing one, so I wanted that to be the predominant way to do it. So the only things we need to do, we need to open up our pen or start a new one and create a new one, and then follow these steps. And you're going to click the settings button up in the corner here. And then once the settings open, you're going to click there's a JS option over here on the left side. And then you're going to hopefully recognize, potentially if you did this last time, these spaces to add what they call external scripts or pens. We want to add one in the first available field. So if you do have, if this is an existing project or even existing from last time, if you already have session 7's email practice, that was 2 URLs, you'll want to enter this one in the third field down there. So this is the URL that we need to add. Once it's entered, we can click the green save and close button that's down here at the bottom right below this part. This is the URL. You can copy and paste it. Should be able to copy and paste it right out of the PDF. Just make sure it roughly keeps the same formatting, doesn't put any funny characters in. Sometimes PDFs are a little bit troublesome in that way. Now, once you have that, you can click save and close, and that will bring you back into the pen that's either blank if you started a new one, or the one that you've already been using for quite some time if not. So either way, whether you started a new one or if you entered the URLs, we now have several different functions available to us in JavaScript. You can see them if you go directly to that URL. So there's 3 functions technically, 2 of them that matter. One called get Snapple fact and one called get magic answer. So these are sort of the 2 routes that we've contemplated having you go. One of them will return for you a random Snapple fact, and one of them will return one of the random answers that you would get if you shook a magic 8-ball. I'll pause for a moment to explain what both of these things mean, because I think there's a decent chance that some of you have no idea what either one is. So in my first example here, I have a Snapple bottle. So inside the lids of Snapple bottles, usually iced tea and things like that, they print random facts. They're usually very silly and very nonsensical, but generally speaking, at least, they are true and interesting. So Snapple publishes a gigantic list of all 800 and some facts that are possible to find in the inside of a Snapple bottle. And then a magic 8-ball used to be this toy slash thing. I'm sure people would prefer it not be called a toy because they used to take it very seriously, but you would shake it, and inside of it, suspended in liquid, is an icosahedron, which is a 20-sided little object, and each side had some answer printed on it of some kind. And so what you would do is ask it a question, shake it, and look at it, as you can see she's doing here, and then determine an answer for your question. It was mostly supposed to be fun. Some people took it very seriously. So given those 2 options, we decide which way we go. The first thing I would say is let's look at the data as it's represented here. So we're using this, this wonderful application called Airtable, which lets us put databases online, very easy to look at, view, pay attention to, and visualize in our case, but also very easy then you'll see in this JavaScript file that we're going to be using. It also lets us reference things that are in there as we pick a random number for the index, and then we pull one of them out. So we have either we're querying, is what we would say if we were selecting a random record from the facts or a random record from the magic table. You'll see here we have 2 tables, one called facts and one called magic. So in our facts table, we have an ID, just like we had for the planets. Again, It would be pretty unlikely to have two of the exact same fact in here, but we do it always just to be sure. It's important to make sure we have consistency. So we have this set of this column that has all of the IDs in it, and then we have this column that corresponds that has all these different facts. And you can see how tiny this little scroll bar is and how far down we have to go. Just pick a random one in this way. So pigs were banished from Philadelphia city streets in 1710. Very helpful. Actually, I have a little rash here of Philadelphia related trivia. So this entire thing is just all of these random facts, all the way down to number 868. An octopus has 3 hearts. And then in our other table that we're using, again, we have an ID. You'll see it's unique the whole way down, 1 through 20. And then we have a column called answer. And these are all of the different 20 possible answers that could be shaken up and then revealed in a magic 8-ball. In our virtual sessions, maybe I'll find a video or something of someone using a magic 8-ball, or if any of your parents happen to have one sitting around, or your grandparents. I'm a little bit concerned to ask, but if anyone does that they want to bring and show us, I'd love to actually be able to have someone present one. So these are all of the possible options. You can see some of them are yeses, some of them are maybes, reply hazy, cannot predict now, and then some of them are no's, like don't count on it, and sources say no. So the idea is that you can use either one of these sets of data and the functions that we've built in here to pull a random fact or random answer, and then we're going to populate a specifically ID'd div inside of your pen with whatever that random thing would be. And of course, because it's a JavaScript function, we can call it on a button click. So let's talk about how we would do that. So before we decide, the first thing we need to do before we invoke, which is another way to say use any of these functions, is we've got to have a cool button. You've got to have a button that someone can't help but click. You either want one that they're going to click that's going to give them a funny random fact, or it's going to let them ask a question and then it's going to give them a random answer, just like they shook a magic 8-ball. So styling a button, a lot of similarities between styling anything else that we have. You can see in this case, so our first step 1, whether you're doing this in an existing CodePen or you're starting a new one. If you're starting a new one, make sure you include the HTML and the body before you jump into this. You can see my example here. Very, very simple, not much code at all, but make sure you have these 2 things before you put your button in place. And then once you have that and you see that, it's going to look gray and small and really boring and not very fun. No one's going to click that. But if you go a little bit outside the box, then they will. So in this case, I chose a bunch of crazy styles, including a teal background and a purple text, and I gave it a border and I put a huge font on it. And then I also, you'll see, if you remember in our CSS, so if we put a dot in front of something, then that means class. So up here in my button, I put class equals my button, and then I did that. Now, buttons also have events on them, which is pretty handy. If you want to make it a little more interesting, you do the same part as you have right here, but then you add a colon and the event, in this case, hover, which means that when I hover my cursor over top of the button, the style will change. In this case, I have just inverted and switched my background color and my text color from teal and purple to purple and teal. So what that looks like in here is I have this teal button with a black border and purple text. And if I hover on it, you'll see it switches. So that's pretty neat. And then over here with my magic 8-ball, I did a very similar thing, except I had it switch between purple and black and purple. So you can be much more creative compared to that. There's a couple different ways that are very easy if you're looking to be very, very creative. In addition to just making a button large, we also have this entire page, which has a bunch of suggestions about how you can change different parts of your button. So here's like the plain one that they start with, but then they get into putting colors in and different sizes You can make rounded buttons, you can make bordered buttons, you can make hoverable buttons. And some of these also have even like transitions. So for the hover, you'll notice it looks like it's fading to the transition instead. That's pretty neat. You can give it shadows. So when you hover over it, it looks like there's a shadow on it. And just like when we're attempting things that we include in here that we tell you to set it up and then play with some of the numbers and see what happens, or some of the colors, you can do the same here. You can come in and take what they include for each of those two things, whether it's on the hover or whether it's on just the normal shadow, and then change these around and see what happens if you change this number or change this number and see what that does. Presumably we wouldn't want a disabled button because we want people to click on it, but it is possible. You can put different widths, you can put borders on them, you can change and add arrows, things like that. Button press clicks, events or effects on click. So those are all lots and lots of options. You also can change the font family. Basically anything that we're able to change on a text field or anything like that, you can change on a button. If there's something you're trying to do and you can't figure out how to do it, let us know. I'm sure we can come up with a source that'll tell you or give you some help via email. The other thing that I did find that I've never used, but it looks kind of interesting, is this Best CSS Button Generator, which kind of lets you come in and really mess with like these different things and make a super silly looking button potentially, and make it look, it has text under it, and it goes to the side and get shadows and all this kind of stuff that you can add. And then that's a ridiculous looking button, but let's say you were happy with what you had here. And again, you can pick different things from in here to starting points as well if you like certain colors. And then once you're happy with what's here, if you just click Get Code, you'll see that it'll give you a .my button, so class my button. Then it might also give you a hover, it might also give you this active, anything like that. You just want to copy all of that, and then you can actually bring that over into your CSS section instead of the stuff that you may have added, or in addition to the stuff you may have added. That's actually the reason that I put, that I called this my button and called the class my button, even though realistically I would normally have come up with a more specific name. It's because I figured if anyone wanted to come in here and use this, it makes it much easier just to already have this be the name of the class. So either of those are options, or anything else that you can come up with to style your really, really cool button. So now let's say you've got your really, really cool button. You're super excited. Everyone is going to be ready to click on it. It's going to be crazy. Oh, it's going to be so fun. Okay. So we have to add a place for whatever random data record we want to have, whether it's going to be a Snapple fact or whether it's going to be a Magic 8-Ball answer. We've got to have a place for it to go, because if you remember, over in our two functions, we have the same line in both of them, almost same line in both of them. It says document.getElementById random.innerHTML. Now you'll remember from when we did our Mad Lib style question and then populating of an element, that what this means is we're going to change the contents of the element with the ID random to be this or to be this. Now this is going to be the fact or the answer column value that our random query pulls back. So again, jumping over here, in our magic table, answer is this column here, and in our facts table, fact is this column here. So that's what we're going to pull, is whatever goes into that. So we've got to give it this element with the ID random so that that value has some place to go. So I have it right here below my button and above my goofy Snapple GIF. And then I have it right here above my goofy Magic 8-Ball GIF. Now you can and should style that div with the ID random so that it appropriately isn't just some tiny bit of text right at the bottom of the button that's going to be hard to recognize. So in my case, I gave it some very basic stuff. I believe it's the same in both. So you can change that however you want. Here are some suggestions that are really goofy looking, like a dotted border that's yellow. But change that however you think makes sense. If you really want to go for bold, attempt to come up with what a Snapple cap coloring scheme looks like, and maybe you can make it look like it's being printed on a Snapple cap. That's hard to say. I will admit I would be very, very impressed with that. Okay, so now we have the random place, the random ID div that we're going to put our random data record, which will be returned by the JavaScript function of our choice that we added into the settings and external scripts of our CodePen. Hopefully we're all on the same page of that lengthy little wandering leap. Okay, so that was step one, add a place for the random data record to go. Got the place, great. Moving on, last step. Look, we're almost done, it's looking great. Okay, we have to decide which type of random data record we want. Do you want a Snapple fact or do you want a magic answer? Go either way. So if you decide you want to make your website visitor feel like they have just opened an ice cold Snapple and prepared to read the fact on the inside of the lid, then you want to change your HTML button code to this. The purple stuff is the new stuff. You've already had the class my button. You already have the input type equals button. You already have value. I changed in this case the two values prior up here. It said just click me, but I figured you might as well customize it a little bit. So this one now says Snapple me. And then we just add an on-click event, which is get Snapple fact. And we don't even need to write any JavaScript for this, because all we're doing is directly calling this function, and this function is going to take care of inserting that random fact straight into our HTML for us, into that div that we've laid way and nicely made for it. That's very exciting. And then if we decide that we want to give our visitor a chance with a virtual magic 8-ball to ask a question and find their future to be revealed, or at least their answer, then we should probably add a text field first that lets them ask a question, because if they can't ask a question, then I mean clicking shaking a magic 8-ball virtually, probably not nearly as exciting. So we give them a text field, we give it an ID, even though we're not actually using it, though you could. We're not using it, we should still give it an ID just because it's good practice. We give it a placeholder that tells them what they should do, enter their question, and then we modify our button to change what it should print so it's clear. Click me would still be appropriate, but in this case, you want to shake it a little bit. And then we change the on-click to be the other function, which is get magic answer. Get Snapple fact, get magic answer. And over here, get Snapple fact, get magic answer. Again, the Snapple fact is working against the facts table, and magic answer function is working against the magic table. So we are going to get one of these random facts if we click the Snapple me button, and we are going to get one of these random answers if we click the shake me button. So let's go into our first example one. Here we go. If I click Snapple me, I get the lemon yellow tree frog is only active in the darkness of night. Okay, any others? The first American gold rush happened in North Carolina, not California. One more. New York taxi drivers collectively speak about 60 languages. That seems right. Okay, so we could continue hitting this button more than 800 times, and while we have a chance certainly to repeat the answers every now and then, we likely would get a whole bunch of different ones. So that's awesome. And then our other option here is to enter our question. Will the sun shine this weekend? And because I'm polite, dear magic 8-ball. There we go. We say shake it. You may rely on it. That's exciting. I really hope it is sunny. If I didn't like that, I shouldn't have shooken it twice. Don't count on it. So you could ask any question your heart desires and see exactly what answers you repeatedly get back. And you could put a lot of funny GIFs down here or an image or something like that to show you exactly what people might see in case someone else is not familiar. So in here, you can actually see it's a little blue triangle inside of a black circle. So if you're really looking to be creative, you could find some way to build that maybe in your CSS. But these are the 20 possible answers, which you can see also in here as they range. Okay, so that brings us to the end. I have some ideas possibly for some challenges as well related to databases, but I wanted everyone to be able to start looking through this. And then hopefully in the next couple of days, once we've had a chance to view this a bit, I'll send some follow-up ideas in case you're able to do this pretty easily, and then looking for some more challenging stuff. But in the meantime, definitely go crazy styling those buttons, go crazy styling the whole thing, make it an experience. And that way we can all view it together and enjoy the facts and enjoy all of our questions. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Have a good weekend. Bye.